We're back. Thank you for joining us on Vermont Film Essentials. This is season 6, and we are kicking off with West Side Story. My name is David Metzger.
I'm Devon Ewald.
And yeah, let's just get into it.
Okay.
So, first musical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I am, because I don't know what you're about to say,
Mm-hmm.
and musicals aren't really, I can't say that it's my favorite genre.
Right.
But there are certain musicals that I just wholeheartedly love.
I think we're probably very similar in that regard.
This is one of them, and one of the reasons is because when I was a kid, my dad had a bunch of records, and I would just go through them. And one time I pulled out, and there was the big West Side Story soundtrack, and I just loved the cover. So I'm like, "What's this?" And he's like, "That's your mom's." And
was it red with the what you would see on the film cover?
Right.
Yeah.
And then I asked my mom, and she's like, "Oh, it's a musical. We'll watch it someday." And then someday came, and it was on TV one night, and my mom and I just kind of settled in and watched it. And I love that memory of just sitting with my mom and watching a movie. Like, there's plenty of movies that I have with my dad, like the Westerns and John Wayne, and this was like one of those connections that I had with my mom of just watching this movie. And there was something about it, like I wasn't a kid that just liked musicals or liked that type of thing, but there was just something about the way they walked around, the way they talked, and something about the opening, like the overture, and something like this is what I've come to respect about Robert Wise as a director, and specifically with this movie is, he could have started it any way, but he's got this grand overture, and then it just goes into these overhead shots of New York.
Yes.
And somehow, you're in this, here's New York, here's the real city.
But doesn't it feel the same as if he would have done the same thing if it was a straight up Romeo and Juliet adaptation over the city of Verona?
Right.
Right. Doesn't it feel like he's doing such an homage to that play, but through this New York City lens?
Right.
I mean, it's great.
Yeah. And then there's also a point of it of because I think he knows, okay, not everyone's going to be into watching this stage musical. And it's a reflection of a toughness of New York, but seen through a stage musical lens. So for him, he's like, okay, I'm going to put you into the city.
I've never seen a musical be tougher. Right? Yeah. Musicals get their rap, their whatever it is, and it's just there's something about this that is just man, something has to, a lot of it has to do with Russ Tamblyn. I gotta say, he injects the film with such a authentic kind of toughness, not to mention his acrobatic and gymnastic training that just is on full display, that makes it effortless. But as soon as you see him, it just really lends the rest of, and I know, Bernardo, the actor, won the Oscar, and he was good.
Yeah.
But nothing like Tamblyn's. Have you seen High School Confidential?
No.
See that? Because, man, I thought Tamblyn was the cool, not to mention Twin Peaks in his later career, but I thought he was the coolest guy. He plays an undercover cop who has to pretend he's it's at 1958, I think. Cool. But it's so that's what, seeing this again, it's wow, he's the coolest, man. And
when I saw, I connected with him more than Tony, and I, even later as I'm watching it, I'm like, yeah, you're cool too. But
Tamblyn auditioned for Tony.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty good consolation prize,
He's like the, just like in Romeo and Juliet, he's kind of he almost
Mercutio.
has to be.
He is the Mercutio. Yeah, but it is its own. That's the thing. Just because you're, it's sort of like when I wrote my book based on, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, it was you're like worried about, is this too much of a, you know, and then it truly becomes its own thing. Right? Like it really is a free standing piece of art.
Yeah. And I think even if, I think most people would like watch it and not even get it until someone said, oh, it's, you know, it's Romeo and Juliet.
Because it does such a good job of being its own story, and these characters are real. And there's a lot of actual social consciousness in the film too, as far as, I mean, the song America, dealing with what, you know, with what immigrants coming over felt, this kind of displacement and wanting to kind of, you know, become just accepted within the culture, but then going up against this sort of like wanting to retain your culture and be like, and that sort of clash was brilliantly on display. Really was.
It does have the toughness of a Scorsese. I was almost thinking of like there's moments where it's like a Bronx Tale.
There is a sense of realism throughout the entire film that somehow complements this sort of this stylization that is so interesting. It's like, and they meet head to head at some point so beautifully, because you have this, the first thing, it's like the opening whistle sets the tone of the film, right? And then you've got the aerial shots, and then the introduction to the gangs is so stylish, and you get a sense of their characters.
It's one of my favorite, because you get these overhead shots, and then all of a sudden, you know, it zooms in on the playground, and then it's zooming, then...
Right, and there's no dialogue in the opening 10 minutes.
Nope.
There are maybe some sounds, maybe some inarticulate, you know, like, and then the moment when there's this kind of stylized dance fighting going on, and how the real violence, the realistic violence, erupts out of that dance fighting is brilliant. It's like, how did they, and also the setup to America is so. Sometimes musicals, they get into this way of, you know, no shade on Newsies. I know that one person in particular is going to be really, you know, mad at me for bringing that up, but it's that kind of exemplifies this sort of like unrealistic approach that I think this is like the antithesis of just like, no, these are real performances, real characters. You get a real sense of their lives, their hopes, their dreams, their fears, all that, and that's why when the musical numbers come out of that, it doesn't seem far-fetched. It doesn't seem like.
And I think they really do a good job of marrying, like, there's certain musical cues that are born out of natural sounds of the city, and like that's how it starts. That's how you're introduced to it.
Right.
So all of a sudden it's just seamless, and you don't even think like oh, they're singing, that's weird. It's just like, yeah, of course they're singing. Like, of course, that's all part of the whole.
And you know, it is such a well-written musical. Like, let's not forget, it's like there's a reason that Wise had Jerome Robbins come in to direct those sequences until he got replaced. But it's like, I mean, it really is such a cool combination of choreography and realistic direction. It's brilliant. And there's truly nothing like this film. I mean, there's really, even you could go to Singing in the Rain and all these different landmark musicals, but this was epic. You really don't notice its length, you know, while you're watching it.
It feels like an event, like an event movie.
And you get caught up in it. You really do get, in a way that you're really hoping, you know it's not going to end well, but you sort of get lulled into this sort of false sense of security while you're watching it because of the strength of the writing and the performances.
And you feel the deaths.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, the Rumble scene is something really, it's really great. And then post Rumble, the way that they are working through their angst and their sense of loss and their urges to commit violence in revenge, it's really well handled. And I think, and that's where, you know, it really is a coming of age film. And you really do get that sense of these lives that are being altered by these everyday occurrences in these neighborhoods, you know?
Right. And the relationship between the cops and the kids.
Right. Yeah, those are some fun scenes. I love the way they find a way to, really. I know I was reading that they kind of took out some parts that were maybe a little bit profane, a little bit more profane, but then they find a way to say "crup you,"
Right.
which I thought was just great. It's like that is perfect.
They had to work around it because they were supposed to say
Right.
that.
Right. It's great.
The songs are great. The
They
songs
really
are
are.
so.
They are the star of the show
You
in a movie that has great lead performances, and I mean performances throughout. I mean even God, who's John Astin from Addams Family?
Yep.
He's uncredited, and I thought he stole that scene because he was so at least before the actual mambo sequence began. Like he just has that kind of ability to be interesting. Has that face and manner and demeanor.
And that whole sequence, like this is one of my favorite color films because there's such an expressionistic use of color,
Yes,
in particular
absolutely.
in
It was
that
one of the
sequences.
first things that I noticed.
Yeah,
And the transition into the dance is very experimental as far as editing goes. It almost felt like a Coppola film, like the stuff Coppola was doing in the Rain People and later in Apocalypse Now. Like it really was this sort of sense of.
He even in Rumblefish, like he based the choreography of the fights in that film
Nice.
off of West Side Story.
That's great. I mean, 10 Oscars. Like, come on. It's one of those things where it's like at that point, I guess you couldn't say that because it's like Titanic won a ton,
Right.
and it's like I don't think that film necessarily ages well. Whereas this is like, yeah, of course it won that many.
Right.
I mean, it's just undeniable.
Even like of the films of this time, there's always that one thing that you kind of have to forgive because you got Natalie Wood.
Right.
And
unfortunately, that was just a product of its time.
Right. Right.
But
And
did you hear the story about how she got the role?
No.
I was reading it. So Warren Beatty was strongly considered for Tony, and he came in for his audition, and Natalie Wood and he were dating at the time because they had been in Splendor in the Grass, and she just came in as a favor to him to have someone to like audition off of.
Right.
Was not even in consideration for Maria, and he didn't get the role, and then they offered it to her.
That's great.
I mean, it's just it's love when stuff like that happens. It's like
Warren Beatty would have been interesting.
yeah, Elvis too was
Wow.
was one of the, but his agent or manager did not want to be. He thought it was a negative association, even though I was reading it's like he did King Creole and that has violent scenes of violence in it. But apparently after Elvis was pretty regretful about not doing it when opportunity to be in.
I wonder what sadly, like there's not a lot of behind the scenes stuff in the film and that you can read about. But
Right.
I always wonder like what the temperature of the film was before the film came out. Like
Right.
Obviously they had a hit musical, but did they just think it would translate and that would be it, or did they
Right.
really think like this could be in turmoil and this could not work? But I think that's to Wise's credit as a director of how he can, just how he thought cinematically of how you translate a stage musical into a film. Because I think a lot of people would just take it and just film that.
Right. Well, because there's a certain when you have because it was a hit musical before it was a film, right? Or had it approached like?
I think it was just reaching a hit until it was
because I feel like
almost
a lot
in
of
tandem.
times when filmmakers or when producers want to make films out of hit plays or musicals, they know that the popularity of the brand of that show is going to fill seats, regardless of the ability to turn it into a specific cinematic experience, right? That's why it's such like a tough thing to pull off.
Right.
And like Glenn Ross is like one of those examples of like finding ways to make it cinematic, especially in something like that where it's just actors talking a lot of times. So you make it really interesting to what's in the background, what are the colors, what are the, and I think there really was an attention to that in this, but it sort of felt like, it's like a ride, man. Like it really felt like I was like at an amusement park, and I'm like, now I'm in this room, and then I get my cart gets brought into this room, and it's like it's truly a panoramic kind of show,
Yeah. And much more so that he would later go on and do it again with Sound of Music.
Absolutely.
But for my money, this is better only because you just feel him. Oh, I'm just pulling all the cinematic.
Right.
I'm pulling everything I have in my cinematic toolbox to make this an experience for you that you're not going to get.
I got a sense of the Italian New Wave.
Yep.
They're definitely like Rocco and his brothers. There definitely was some Visconti, Rossellini, that sort of feel of. Yeah, I mean, you really felt it in those scenes between friends, and just growing up in a neighborhood where you might be more prone to getting into trouble,
right. Right.
And no parental role models. It's like really you're kind of left, and that's just sometimes just the nature of growing up, where you might even have good parents, but it's like you're just not in tune to what they're trying to give you,
And it feeds off of that same type of, like that frenzied melodrama that works and gets you into the heads of these teenagers, similar to like Rebel Without a Cause. It like uses those same expressionistic colors and those same techniques to do it. And Wise cut his teeth with Orson Welles.
Yes, Magnificent Ambersons. Yeah.
And what did he do? Did he helped edit on Citizen Kane?
I did not know that.
I think he did something on it. Was like either he wasn't the full editor, but he was like an assistant or something. So he had to have, taken a lot.
He really seems to have been a great student of film, and especially to work with someone that was that groundbreaking, especially at that time, really just soaking it all up. And then when was his, trying to think of his first film, I can't remember what it is, but he had, it's cool to look at some of these later ones, like Star Trek the Motion Picture and Sound of Music and West Side Story, and then like you've got Born to Kill with Lawrence Tierney and the setup with Robert Ryan, so you got these like noirish, hard-boiled films, black and white, cutting his teeth, and then to have The Day the Earth Stood Still, and this is pretty good. We talked about like poker hands for filmmakers. Right. He's looking pretty good with his 5, right? I mean, Sand Pebbles, The Haunting, pretty good, man.
I love, in particular with this film and The Haunting, and I forgot about The Day the Earth Stood Still, but The Haunting is so wonderful the way he uses the camera in that film. But yeah, we're talking about a director who, he knows how to be visual and he knows how to be cinematic, and I think that's the.
I think for him to it looks like it from his filmography, he really needed to believe that he could do something special with this particular project. It seems like that was a prerequisite, or he wouldn't do it. Right? Whereas you have some kind of more for hire directors that are just like, all right, this will keep me going, and I'll get But he really seemed to have a clear sense of his ability, and once again, it's that age-old concept of surrounding yourself with quality people. I mean, you look at the people involved in this film; they all have very decorated resumes.
Who did you read anything on the cinematographer?
Yes, Daniel L. Thapp. He had The Big Clock, 1, 2, 3, The Great Escape. I love Lord Love a Duck. I don't know if you're great British comedy, and Ice Station Zebra, but those last two are more like just like cult favorites of mine. But The Big Clock is definitely one of the better noirs in history, and 1, 2, 3 is one of those that I have to. I feel like I'm the problem when I think that I don't like that film, because I'm like, wait a minute, it has an 8 rating on IMDb. Like,
Yeah.
something about, maybe I wasn't the right age to really understand what was going on in that film, but.
Well, I think you're not alone, because I've heard there's some other people who have said that they don't like it, but I wonder if it's because they see the apartment, and the apartment is so special,
Right.
and then you watch 1, 2, 3, and it's like that's the movie he
such
did
a
right
different
after it, and it's like
tone,
it's just so different. Like
Right,
it's just
right.
this is zany. This is
Right.
nothing.
I think sometimes it's just that some people appreciate a certain style more than, like, I didn't like the front page, but you know, and I think to tie it back into West Side Story, it's like it's one of those things where stylization can be polarizing, right? It just happens to be that in this film it really works because there's a blend of style. It's stylized realism.
Right.
Man, that is so hard to pull off. Like, I think Baz Luhrmann was a genius at that when he was really on, you know?
And I think what's so great about this movie and why it attracts so many, like, just a grand audience, is because it does play in that very Titanic type way of, you know, there is something for the male audience as well as something for the female audience. And there might be a lot of men who say, well, I don't want to go see a musical, I can't connect to anything in a musical. But then you watch this and you're like, oh, like, shit, this is really tough stuff. And it does such a great job of, like, of playing off of those expectations. And I think, and I know people who have a problem with not being able to take it seriously, that they're fighting, but it's so choreographed and they're obviously dance fighting.
Right.
But I feel it does such a great job of cluing you into that right from the jump. That
Yes. And you know, I really think that has to be put on Tamblyn, man. The way when he is leading that charge, if they're doing like pirouettes for something, it doesn't feel like it still feels like cool,
right,
and tough. Like, he really gives it an air of, he just had that air of just effortless cool, and I think that the other actors could feed off it, because I don't necessarily know if they did.
Right.
Like, they're more Broadway. I feel like they're a little more like theatrical, whereas Tamblyn just had that, like, you felt like he was the guy. Like, this didn't seem like acting.
Right.
Like,
he has, like, even in his reading, like, he nails the accent and the way you speak in a certain way, and that it feels authentic. Like, you feel like you're watching a real New York dude
exactly
going through this. And part in the costuming, that jacket that he wears, like, that I want that jacket.
Exactly. You know, 2 points I wanted to make. The one is, I love when there's this, talked about this, the kind of social messages that are going on. When, what's her name? Rita Moreno's character, the friend, Maria's friend, I can't remember her name right now. When she shows up at Doc's pharmacy to kind of try to find Tony, right? And she's getting, like, thrown around, and they're really, you know, there's strains of the melody to America that just go in every now and then. You're like, it's brilliant. It's like, yep, America. It's the hypocrisy of that. You know, it's just like, it's really a great way to say, yeah, this is a problem. This racism, this intolerance is definitely part of the story and needs to be seen. And that was just a way to kind of be like, yeah, take that with a grain of salt. Just really well done.
And the way that, like, the violence is just going to keep feeding itself, and the adults that should take the responsibility and try to help these kids don't, and just try to, like, you know,
I mean, Krupke's pretty obtuse, and it's like I really don't, you know. Who do they really have? There really isn't a clear-headed, strong adult figure that can, like, except for Doc maybe, but Doc's world weary, man.
Right.
Doc is like, there's nothing I can do. It's like tragic.
Right.
The other point I wanted to make is, so you remember in Rio Bravo when I saw the word sad?
Yeah.
So in this one, I don't know if you noticed, but it either says Eastern Warehouse or Easter Warehouse, but at first all you see is East War. And it's right before the Rumble, and it's just—that's all it says, East War. And then the camera moves a little bit, and it shows that it actually says this. But you're like, no, that was. There's too much of a precision, especially to the framing of shots in this film,
Right.
That does not allow it to be coincidental. It's just, love that stuff, man. Like, even if you don't consciously notice it, it's there to kind of gear your brain towards what's to come. You know.
There's even a little bit, because there's the girl that's trying to be the boy, right? There's a little bit of that in there.
True. I didn't even look at it like that. Yeah.
It does. It is superbly written to be as effective as it is.
I think A Bronx Tale
Yeah.
owes something to this.
Yep.
It's the way it feels.
Again, like, and you know, even for people who are like, I don't want anything to do with. It's like the same thing with Douglas Sirk. It's like you don't want anything to do with it because you think of it as of just a melodrama or just a musical.
Well, it's like
but
what Sirk did with melodrama.
Right.
He elevated it.
Right, but he's
Through
being
stylization.
expressionistic. He's using colors. He's using the camera.
Yes.
And the people like Scorsese that we love so much got so much from them.
Yeah, and look at the actors that Sirk worked with too. I mean, Robert Stack, some of these people that he, so it's really such a great way to do melodrama is with actors that can make it real.
I'm excited because Robin loves All That Heaven Allows. When I showed her that, she's like, "Oh, I love this," and I'm like, "Okay, maybe I'll show you some other Sirk. I don't know how it's going to play." So we've got Written on the Wind that we're going to watch.
Such a classic.
And then we saw on TCM they showed a little clip of Magnificent Obsession, and she's like, "What? Another Rock Hudson, Jane Wyman?" I'm like, "Okay, well, that's like the one that's like real melodrama.
Right.
Like if you can get through that, you can get through anything."
Right. And that was definitely one complaint I had about West Side Story is that Natalie Wood's performance is a tad over theatrical, and you don't really even notice it until her response to the news that her brother died, and then seeing Tony. It just, I don't know, it just didn't feel real, and it just tonally kind of became like I felt like even Chino, even his response to her not caring about, caring more about Tony, was realer than anything she did.
Right.
It just felt like
she has, because I have a similar complaint in Rebel Without a Cause, like when she just saw her boyfriend go off the cliff and die in the crash, and she seems like that in a way is almost seems like she underplays it, it just
well, and who knows what went into why she maybe couldn't emote in a way that was because of the way her mom treated her and the way she, I heard a story about how she couldn't cry for this one audition, so her mom called her back over and literally I don't, who knows if it's true, but either killed her dog or seriously hurt and then she went back out on the stage and was crying and got the part. So that kind of stuff can, if any of it's true, really kind of affect how you, I mean, you're either going to be really good at emoting, or maybe you're going to be a little bit fragile and be afraid of being so vulnerable.
Right. And that's it's a small complaint, I guess.
Yeah, believe me, it was for the most part, it was this is truly one of the best films ever made.
It's one of, like, I have to, like, I say Singing in the Rain is my favorite musical because it totally it
'Cause
is.
yeah.
But I do put West Side Story as my second favorite, just
too.
because it just really, I don't know, part of it is the memory with my mom, but also just in watching it and keep watching it, it's like, no, there's like so much that you can take from it stylistically and cinematically. And I think it's one of those films that you just have to see on the big screen, and I'm hitting myself because I had 2 chances and we missed them, but I love like the big scope of it.
Oh, I can't imagine. There's certain shots where, first of all, there's so many. The scope of some of these shots is truly astonishing. I mean, just in use of lines and color, and there's one in particular that I just love during the dance, when the camera is just low to the ground, and the width of the shot and the control of where the camera is, and then it leaves it a couple times, but it goes back to this one static shot. And it just is classic. I think Tarantino might have been influenced for Pulp Fiction.
Definitely.
In the twist scene.
Yep.
From that shot. Like, not even just the scene, the shot itself seems to be in the same place where Uma Thurman and Travolta are, like where they are in the shot. It feels like an homage. Yep. And I didn't even realize it until I rewatched West Side Story from just an open perspective, because you really do change over the years. You really do learn if you keep watching films. It's like it can be a whole new experience to watch a film again.
And there's particular dances that I like to watch just because sometimes it feels like I don't know if the camera is actually moving or if I just think that it's so in tune with what the steps are going to be that it kind of effortlessly just feels like it's moving with the actors as they're doing it. But I think if I'm thinking of the low shot that you're thinking of, it's the same one as like when they're dancing, they actually like they come in low with the snaps, and that's one of those ones where it's like, oh my God, did I just see the camera just kind of tilt up a little bit like that? But there's a in particular with the cinematography and the editing of the sequences, there's just such an effortless flow with the music into the scenes that it can't help but just take you into its story.
It never feels like, oh, here's another musical number coming, because it's not clumsily achieved. It's brilliantly, just seamlessly achieved. It just arises out of, and America is the one that just comes to mind because of how well they set it up, with just like giving each other, giving each other, guff, and then it just becomes this real conversation. That's really what that song felt like, is a back and forth, and fun, kind of like Battle of the Sexes type song. And you really just, I think what songs should really achieve is, if you're doing something where you want your narrative to be prominent, is that it should either advance the story in a way or advance character development in a way, so that it's not just a song, because that's what's going to drive the lyrics of the song and make them memorable. There's one line in particular that is just incredible in the song Maria, where Tony says, "Say it loud and it's like music playing. Say it soft and it's almost like praying." I mean, that's just a genius line in any context. And you really got to give it to Leonard Bernstein for just an incredible, who I looked up, his only other film score credit is On the Waterfront, so it's pretty good twofer there. But yeah, I just, and this really is one of those films where I think the level of musical achievement and visual achievement is really what it's like. You usually don't get both. I mean, it's why Singing in the Rain is so good.
It's funny that you just mentioned I didn't even think of that, even though I know that he did on the waterfront, but they're almost, I mean, just thinking about it, it's like almost like a good double feature, because both of them connect with the audience in such a way that it's like no, this is our city. This is our, like when Brando sees his brother dead, you feel it so much because no, that's our brother.
Right.
And I think this film does that in a similar way, is that it connects with the verve of the city, no matter, even if you grew up in a city or not, you grew up in a similar place.
It does a good job of, which is ironic because of the casting of Natalie Wood, but it does a good job of not whitewashing the film. It doesn't like force you to watch it from a certain perspective. The Puerto Rican gang and just group of friends is not viewed as other. It's not like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because I feel like a lot of films, especially from previous to that era, really would kind of make you see it that way. There was a sort of social kind of direction of the film that, and you really had, it really was up to the director to make sure that this is a human film, that this is not about these old, worn out ideals, and and it does, especially in a city like New York City, that is just such a celebration of people. It's really great to watch because you just do get a sense of all these different lives and how it's like, hey, we're really all alike, even with cultural differences.
Right. And part of that, is her friend's name Anita? I don't know why that's.
I think so, yeah.
Because she won Best Supporting
Actress.
Actress.
Yeah, she did. They both. Yeah.
And I think like she was the part of that.
Her and Tamlin, and it really is. It's like the one next to the one, like they really were the two. Right. The consciences really of.
And it's interesting because they both, they both got passed up for the parts that they probably should have played because they're more,
but also
they're closer to it.
The casting directors might have known that these were more pivotal roles in the hierarchy of the structure. Right. Yeah.
I think that you do have to, because man, you connect with him so much, and even like her, like America is her shining moment. You connect with her so much that you really do have to, because that's going to drive their whole internal struggle.
And I love the interplay between her and Bernardo. It's really great.
You feel like they're a real couple.
Yes. And there's a little bit of Streetcar Named Desire to their relationship. And it really, by making that believable and means something to you, it really does, it makes it that much more of an emotional impact when his life is taken, because you just feel it. Much more than, in my opinion, Biff's relationship with his girlfriend. Right? Like she reacts to it, but it's really not. You can feel the utter despair that Anita feels, even if she actually does a pretty good job of kind of like trying to act like it's not affecting her, right?
All of these like little, like, because we're saying like, it's a little bit like On the Waterfront, it's a little bit like Rebel Without a Cause, it's a little bit, like I do
all these
think,
films preceded it, right?
And they did, and I think he knew that. Like when I was thinking about this, I was almost going to say he was wise to it, but that would have been unforgivable. But no, I think he knew that. Like I think he knew, like, okay, I know we've got to play with this iconography because this is the iconography that connects with our audience.
Right.
And this is what, like, we want it to be authentic. We don't want the audience to ever say, I don't believe that these are a New York gang.
Right.
You do have to, like,
I mean, Tamblin's jacket did look like James Dean.
Yes.
It did look like something James Dean would wear. And who knows, they might have gone to him and said, hey, you know, I mean, he already seemed like, just from watching, having seen High School Confidential, which preceded it, it's like they probably had seen that and were like, this guy's pretty damn cool. But it's like James Dean was the essence of that. Right. So it's like, who knows if they might have said something. I know I heard a story about Curtis Hanson directing Eminem in 8 Mile, and Eminem had no acting experience, and was like, he gave him all these James Dean and Brando, Paul Newman movies to watch, and sort of like, hey, you know, here's this raw talent that like maybe we can get some sort of, you know, connection. And you know, obviously Tamblyn was very, very good at what he did, but it helps to get.
Did he come from theater?
I believe so, and I know that since he was a kid, he was a gymnast and an acrobat, and pretty amazing to watch in this film, some of the stuff he does, and just how effortless, and how he's singing the song while he's doing it, and it's like maintaining this like effortless cool. That's why I really think like, yeah, like he and Anita really do set the tone of the entire experience.
Right. And even, and the humor that comes is, it's real, genuine humor. Like it is funny.
Right. Oh, the song. I mean, the song with the, is it Officer Krupke? Yeah, when they're each doing characters, and they're like, you're the psychiatrist. And you're the. I mean, that is just such a fun scene.
There's that. It's great, and sometimes because I hadn't seen it in a long time, probably 2 or 3 years ago, whenever I showed Robin, but like I forgot, like, oh my God, this song is from that. This song is from that.
Oh, I know.
It's one of those things where you can get the soundtrack and you can listen to it. And with a lot of musicals, you're like, well, it's better when you see it in the movie. Right. But with this, it's like you can listen to it and it's fine. Things stand alone. And God, and even like everything is expressionistic about it. Like when the rumble's about to start and the music does, like it goes through that, like the da-da-da-da-da, and then like they're running, and then they're walking to it, and they're talking, and they're singing, and you know, it gets you into this fury,
right,
in such a great way. And that's everything working in chorus. Like that is, it's the screenplay, it's the stage music, it's the editing. It's the choreography, it's the camera. You
know, something that was cool for me watching it this go round was where it's set is those neighborhoods and stuff. I mean, I lived, when I went to school, I lived on 70th and Broadway. So they actually shot using a lot of the vacant buildings because Lincoln Center was being torn down and rebuilt. And they were allowed to use those because of that. And it really created this very just like, I mean, you can't get much more realistic than that, shooting in the neighborhood, right?
See, and that's the type of, like,
it
that's the
decision. Like sound stages, did it?
Right.
You know?
And that's the decision. It's like, no, you know, we can use some of that, but we can't use all of that because then it's just going to be a stage musical.
But that's the bridge between stylization and expressionism and realism. And that is what's so brilliant about it, is they really do, and like the thing is, who did we say he worked with? Wells, right? So it's like, who was a master of that and came from that whole, from the theater, but found a way to make it cinematic, right? God. It was kind of cool just finding out, you know, who was in the stage production, who wasn't, and it's like, so the guy who played Arab on the stage played Action, the guy who played Riff on stage played Bernardo, the guy who played Baby John played Arab, and then the guy who was just part of the, like, chorus kind of, and then like was Baby John's understudy on stage played Baby John in the movie. So just kind of a cool, and then Krupke was in the Broadway stage production as well as multiple other side characters. So you really feel like they, you know, they knew that some things would have to come from Hollywood, but they really did make an effort to utilize whatever they could, you know, because they knew that those are the nuts and bolts of what's going to make this work, right, to pull this off. Oh, another thing which was interesting. So I want to find out her name. Okay, so obviously, Bobby Darin was actually in contract talks to play Tony, but
Wow.
he had some musical things that were going on. So a lot of the main leads, they didn't do their own singing, right? So Marnie Nixon, who sang for Maria, she apparently set the precedent for a ghost singer getting properly compensated. So they had her come in, she does the singing for Maria, and then she didn't sign a contract. So movie comes out and she's like, am I getting compensated for this? It's like, well, you never signed a contract. She's like, and she demanded, I believe she took them to court and demanded royalties, and she didn't, or percentage of it, and she didn't get it. And it's pretty cool because I was reading that I think it was Bernstein that basically said, you know what, I'm going to give you some of my percentage, and took care of her, and that actually was what set the whole precedent of people, because that's the thing is you got all these people who, it's like, I can do what you can't do, but you're getting paid this, right? So, treating people with respect, respecting that person as an artist and not just as a pawn. Well, you have a beautiful voice, come in here and,
That's Singing in the Rain.
Right, exactly, exactly.
Wow.
Man, I thought you would be particularly interested in this one, unless you already know. Do you know who is talking about remaking this?
Spielberg.
Yeah, you're right. And apparently it's not just reportedly. Right. No, the last thing I read in Wikipedia was in 2018, Spielberg said that's in the works. So we'll see. Could be unnecessary, or who knows? Maybe he sees something that he could add to the experience.
Right. Which is, I don't know what you can. It's weird for him because I would think that would be one of those movies that he looks at and is like, you can't touch.
Because even though it still feels pretty modern.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you have to be an appreciator of context to not think, oh, this is corny, or this is cheesy, or
You just can't do Rooftops. Did you ever see Rooftops?
No.
Jason Gedrick of Iron Eagle fame.
Heavenly Kid.
Apparently it's like a 80s remake of West Side Story. To be missed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love watching this movie just for the scope of it. I love seeing the shape of that screen. Mm-hmm. I love seeing everything that is poured into it. I love that Wise doesn't get the credit that he usually gets, but that when you see this movie, you completely know that he is a director who is capable of being completely visual and cinematic, mm-hmm. and knows how to. It's like one of my favorite examples of, what's the difference between a stage musical and a film, mm-hmm. and how do you bridge that gap? How do you say, I'm not just going to give you the stage experience, I'm going to give you something else, I'm going to give you something cinematic. And you see it in every sequence of this film, and how it is so expressionistic with the camera and with the colors, mm-hmm. and how that is, obviously he got that from someone like Wells, but he also got that from someone like Cirque. Mm-hmm. And that, directors that we love, like, even someone like Wes Anderson or Scorsese, mm-hmm. or they...
Oh yeah, had to have pulled from... it's pretty impressive that I did read that the studio was worried about going over budget, so they got rid of Jerome Robbins a third of the way through shooting. So and then didn't replace him, but basically his assistants just directed the remaining dance and musical sequences. And then, like with King Kong, when they gave that writing credit to, I think the guy had, they had a similar situation where like someone, but Wise made sure that Robbins received co-directing credit. So just a dignified move,
Right.
you know, they didn't have to do him like that, you know what I mean? It's like, and apparently he almost suffered a nervous breakdown from his time in the film, so who knows, maybe it was a blessing in disguise. It's like removing him from the situation. But
all right, so West Side Story, it is one of the great musicals. It is worth seeing just for looking at how you take a stage musical and turn it into something cinematic. And in particular, if you don't know Robert Wise, this film, The Haunting, Day the Earth Stood Still,
Sound of Music.
You know, look him up. Even, you know, he does something interesting each time with everything that he's given, and even with something like Star Trek, while most people would say it's not the best Star Trek movie, you can't fault him for trying to do something different.
Didn't he do
and
Andromeda
interesting.
Strain too?
Oh my God, he did.
Pretty sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, look him up. So we're excited to start season 6. We have a good list of movies for you, and in particular this month, just by luck, we ended up picking 3 New York films. So started with West Side Story. Next week we're going to do French Connection. Devin's excited. And then we're going to do Taxi Driver, and then we're going to end this month with a really special episode about film noir.
Yes.
Which I'm really excited about. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week with the French Connection. I'm David Metzger.
I'm Devin E. Ward.